Hello and welcome back to the Outdoor Minimalist Podcast. I'm your host, Meg Carney. I'm an outdoor and environmental writer and author of the book, Outdoor Minimalist, Waste Less Hiking, Camping, and Backpacking. Follow the link in the description to pre-order a copy of the book so you'll be the first to receive it on the release date of September 1st, 2022. The Outdoor Minimalist Podcast has a goal to give listeners actionable ways to waste less hiking, camping, backpacking, and more during every step of their process. Your impact outdoors starts long before you hit the trail and goes beyond leave no trace ethics. You'll learn how to identify sustainable outdoor brands, how to ask hard questions regarding sustainability, and begin to shift and evolve your mindset to integrate minimalism into all of your outdoor pursuits. On this episode of the Outdoor Minimalist Podcast, I have the pleasure of having a conversation with Gilad Nachmani, the co-founder and general manager of CNOC Outdoors. CNOC Outdoors is a small backpacking gear manufacturer based in Portland, Oregon, that focuses on making innovative, durable, and sustainable outdoor gear. So thank you for joining me today to discuss some of your business practices and how sustainability drives many of your business decisions. But before we jump into those big picture topics, could you just give me a brief overview of how you got involved in outdoor recreation, how it's a part of your life, and how you guys got started as a business and where you are today?
No problem. Thank you for having me. So I grew up in Israel, which does not quite have a outdoor recreation environment or community. I think by now it's growing, as got influence from Europe and the US, but when I was a kid it definitely did not exist. It was more the 60s of the United States. We were just outside. We were kicked out of the house in the morning to school, and then we kind of spent the afternoons outside without much of a definition that you go backpacking or hiking or anything like that. And I was involved with a few youth organizations as a kid, as a teenager, and that led me to spend more and more time outdoors, again without any official definition that we're going backpacking, but we just went on trips, and sometimes they were overnight, sometimes they were just day hikes. Then I went to the army. I served my 3 years in the Israeli army, and after being released, I've joined my girlfriend at the time. Her dream was to go and see New Zealand. So we went on a trip to New Zealand, and in my 3 months there, I finally met backpackers, or in New Zealand they call them trampers. They like to do tramping rather than backpacking. But I've met this whole world of gear nerds and people who carry small packs, and they try and optimize the way they hike and what they carry and their time outside. And I got a real bug and came back to Israel and decided to go and work at an outdoor retailer, just a store in Israel, in Jerusalem, that sells outdoors gear. And I got even deeper into the whole bug of gear and tinkering and optimizing my gear and my time outside. After a few months there, I went traveling some more. I headed over to South America. I've pretty much hiked along the Andes, or backpacked along the Andes for about 7 months, and that pretty much made sure that I will never leave backpacking, or will not have backpacking in my life, let's put it this way. After that, I went back to retail, ended up managing a few stores, moved to England, and just stayed in the outdoor industry. Again, in stores, and then I ended up being a buyer and a merchandiser for a retailer in England. So my career in the outdoor industry has been very long, mainly from the beginning as the consumer side, and then on the store floor for many years. And then my wife and I, my family and I, with our kids, we moved to the US about 5 years ago and brought CNOC with us, which started as really my interest in tinkering with gear. Well, it started with my wife saying, stop complaining and just make something yourself, after breaking a pair of poles on a trip in Scotland. And I just contacted some factories in China to see if they can make some of my ideas. And my design got more and more, I don't know if aggressive is the right word, but it seems to be aggressive, because I kept on changing the way they wanted to do that, because it made no sense, to the point that I ended up designing a whole new product. And that's kind of how the company started. in the US, just making trekking poles. It started with the Vertex poles, which we discontinued a couple of years ago. And it wasn't really much of a mind of a company. It was just me wanting to looking for something that I needed and made, and then kept on trying to improve on that rather than a full design mindset.
Yeah, so the need of the trekking poles kind of came out of necessity. And that's really cool because you have a lot of different perspectives, just like cultural perspectives of the outdoor industry, living in different places and visiting different places, but then also being able to experience like their gear and what they have available to them. So when you moved the company over to the United States, did you move it to Portland right away?
Yes. We were very much looking for a place that I can continue recreate, because recreation both in Israel and outdoor recreation in Israel and in the UK are quite demanding. It's just that it's hard for Americans to understand how easy it is to be an outdoors person here. Having public space is amazing, which in the UK doesn't quite exist. And distances are different. So we were looking for a place that we can as a family and we can enjoy outdoor recreation, and a place that has some sort of an outdoor industry. And it was essentially, we narrowed it down to Portland or Denver. My wife's family is originally from Portland, so that was the winner.
Oh yeah, that's an easy way to drive decisions for sure.
Exactly. Just decided to make it easy this time.
Yeah, so I know you now make more than just trekking poles because I have your little reservoir things that you use for filtering water, and I love them.
Thank you.
And I was looking for trekking poles recently, and a friend of mine asked for a recommendation, and I was like, you should try these ones. And she bought them and she loves them. So I think I'll have to get them as well, because I don't have trekking poles yet, but I just moved to the Pacific Northwest, so with the mountains, I need like more stability on the terrain. So
yes, trekking poles do make a big difference in comfort on the trail. It takes a while to get used to it, but once you do, I think it's one of those life-changing items.
Yeah, for sure. So we first connected in 2020 when I was writing the Outdoor Minimalist book. And I'm not exactly sure how we connected, but I remember first looking through your website and everything. And in my book, I talk a lot about how transparency should drive a lot of consumer decisions. So you're looking for brands that are transparent with their business practices. And that was something that I really noticed with your company. So could you explain a little bit more how you integrate transparency into your marketing and customer communications in general?
I guess it's more of a cultural thing. I think the fact that I'm Israeli and the way we perceive communication is a bit different. So when I started the company, it was very easy to just be me. And the first 2.5 years of the company, I was just by myself in my garage. That was quite literally how the company started, out of my garage. So when I was communicating with customers, I wanted to make sure that I'm clear about what happened. So if we had a batch that... So speaking about the Vector it's such a specific product, and I don't have a whole engineering team behind me. So there was a lot of trial and error.
And the Vector is the...
The Vector is the water container.
Okay, yep, the one that I have. Cool.
And again, that one also came out of necessity. It wasn't like I was sitting down with a piece of paper and saying, I want this thread and this material and this so on. I was looking for a container that will have a thread on one hand and a slider on the other. So I was just looking for factories that have capacity to make those things and just asking them, can you make this weird idea that I have? So it was a lot of trial and error in the process. And obviously, as things like that happen, you're going to get mistakes. I know that as a consumer, when a mistake exists, it really frustrates me. I rather just know, even if it means that the company won't do anything, but at least I know. So I made that part of how I communicate with our customers. If there's a problem, if there's a mistake, if there's something that I wasn't aware of, if there's a way to fix things, I rather just let people know. Some people will get angry. Some people will get frustrated. Some will just say, I want my money back, and so be it. Which are all things that I think a company should be able to deal with. But I also think that's part of what our customers like about us. They hear what there is to hear, even if it's sometimes not the most comfortable things to say or hear. And it actually goes back to the first batch of vectors that we made, because The original idea was to just make 1,000 units and kind of test the market as part of the Kickstarter that we've done. I think that was 2017, in the summer of 2017. And then I had a few units tested by different people and I got some feedback. And I've made a few more tweaks with the factory. And then Darwin from Darwin on the Trail ended up talking about the Vector, even though I had no idea he was going to do that. And we sold an extra 2,000 units. And that original order of 2,000 units ended up being 3,000. So it was very much a scramble to make things. And as those things happen, mistakes in the supply chain happen. So when the first batch arrived and I was starting to ship them out, apparently there was a leak from the slider, which is the worst thing that a water container can have. And I went back and I've just checked what happened. And what happened is that we've just changed the density of kind of that wide opening to make it easier to use, because that was the feedback that a lot of testers had. It was too stiff, and most people don't have climber hands, so they wanted something a bit easier to hold. So we've done that, and the factory haven't compensated for the changes in thickness, and the difference was, I think it was 0.02 millimeter of thickness difference, but that was enough to create this tiny seat of the slider. Immediately I went back to the factory, we found a solution, we added a small internal lip in the slider, which still exists to this day because it creates a great seal. And that solved all the issues. But that means that now there are 3,000 faulty units, or about 700 already with customers, and the rest I'm still packing. So instead, I went to the factory, I've made 4,000 units of those, of just the sliders, got them over, and got in touch with everyone I already sent vectors to and said, your slider is not good enough. We have a new one that works better. Can we send it to you? And that's what I've done. And again, it's not because I was trying to be transparent by definition. It's just because that's what our customers expect. And if I can provide them a product that works better, then I would like to let them know and make sure that happens. So that's kind of led to this concept of transparency in manufacturing, in the product, in pretty much our whole processes.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I do think that it helps build trust with the customer, because as a customer, when you do have something that is faulty, like you're saying, it can be relatively frustrating, especially if there's no communication from the company. Like, can you repair this? Can you replace this? Or what's the process that I can go through to make sure that I can get the product that I paid for, kind of thing. So I guess one question I have about that whole process is, what did you end up doing with all of the faulty vectors?
Well, for a very long time, I just moved them from one place to another. They were living in my garage, and then in a storage unit when the garage was too full, and then into a new warehouse. And then we had probably three big bags of faulty sliders, and then we had 2 batches that had faulty welds that we've never even shipped out. They just stayed in boxes. And for a long time, I just kept them in the hope that one day we'll find a solution. And then when Nathan joined the company, Nathan is he's now logistics and impact manager. He started almost 2 years ago. He started by just helping me figure out how to make the company a more sustainable company. So it ties directly to what we're talking about. And he was looking into the process of making us into a B Corp. And my big hope was that one day we'll figure out how to recycle vectors. And that was something he managed to do. He just kept on talking to recyclers. And eventually we found a company that was willing to recycle even post-consumer ones. So eventually all those faulty units ended up being shredded into pallets and then loaded on a boat and going to Malaysia to become something else, probably deck chairs and things like that.
That's awesome. Well, I guess it's good that you kept them for so long.
I just could not take them to the dump. It was too, I felt that it's not the right thing to do. So I'd rather keep them and find the way.
So you said Nathan came on board as your impact manager about 2 years ago. Is that kind of when you started making more of a switch towards a sustainable focus in a lot of your business? Or when did that happen?
I don't think there was a clear step that it happened. The more I dealt with making things, the more I thought, or I was hoping that there are better ways to make them. We are still not there. I wish we were, but we're not. I find that sustainable tends to be cheaper, despite what a lot of information out there. I'm an economist by training, so I always look at the numbers first. And using raw materials or virgin raw materials is the most expensive process. So using recycled materials has always been the most business sustainable process. And I was always hoping to find a way to do so. It requires a lot of resources, both in engineering and R&D and relationships. And at the beginning, I just didn't have the capacity to do so. So I was trying to tweak ways to be as sustainable as possible. So for instance, the vectors, though they are made from TPU, they only have cardboard or it's essentially paper packaging. We don't use any plastic or any nylon in the packaging. And that was from day one. I remember trying to explain to the factory to not put the vector in a plastic bag and in the box. And it was just really hard for them to understand. So that was very intentional because there was just no need to put a plastic bag in it. So that we are talking back in mid 2017. The company wasn't even a year old. So those conversations were already there. But it wasn't a step that happened, a decision that happened as a business strategy. I was always trying to do small steps to have less impact. And when Nathan came to me, he was actually a customer before he joined the company, and when he joined the company, he actually started as a volunteer just out of interest because he just finished a long time at the Peace Corps and he was a bit bored and he was just looking for semi-hobbies to do, and he was more than happy to kind of dig into the world of B Corps because it's very much part of his interest, and I was more than happy to have someone with me to just even another set of eyes to look at that. Because trying to tackle something as big as a B Corp as a 2-people company was a bit too much. So having a third pair of eyes was really useful. And that's probably where we've done the more aware stage. And the moment the company was a bit more stable, just after the pandemic started actually, Nathan moved into a paid employee and we more actively started pursuing the B Corp certificate and making the changes for it.
Yeah, so your company had been around for quite a long time before you were a certified B Corp. And I think that's pretty common for a lot of smaller companies because it kind of takes some time to build up that capability, I guess. I don't really know how else to phrase it.
No, it's an interesting. So in terms of the B Corp itself, we didn't have to do much in terms of changing our practices. They were more than happy with how we produce things, with our processes, with the carbon impact of our products. We try and, again, when we do a warranty replacement, we ask people to send items back so we can recycle them. So we try and reduce the impact constantly. So we had very little changes needed for that. For B Corp, more than anything, you need a lot of things in writing that you're committed to. So for instance, our giving back or our charity work has been quite robust from the beginning. We always gave money to anywhere that is part of how we recreate. But we never put it in writing saying we're going to allocate this percentage of what we make to do various support work. But the B Corp requires exactly that. So there are a lot of steps of just putting things into writing and defining them.
Right. So then Nathan kind of came in and was able to do that sort of record keeping and sending that information to become a B Corp.
Exactly. And then they need to examine. So they work on a lot of things. And so their process is long. We've done, our first application, I think, was finalized towards the end of 2020. And then they have a point system and we thought we had a lot more points, but when they reviewed the documents, they were not according to how they defined them. So we lost a bunch of points. So we were missing about 3 points to get the B Corp. So we had to start again. And you don't start from the beginning of the queue.
Oh, wow, yeah.
You go back to the end of the queue. So that took another year to once again get to the front of the queue and then get assessed and get reviewed and then being approved. So that's the main part of the B Corp. And this is why very few companies start as a B Corp. Yeah, I am not aware of companies that just out of day one were a B Corporation.
Yeah, because it takes time to build up that backlog of information to provide to them. You need to kind of prove that you can qualify. That makes a lot of sense. Something that you said was really interesting to me was that being sustainable as a company and environmentally focused is actually more affordable, because I feel like a lot of times I hear the opposite. What are the advantages then of being environmentally sustainable in accordance to like your bottom line?
Okay, so this is where my economist hat comes up, and it's so to be sustainable or to have a less or being a less impact company, there's a much bigger upfront cost compared to anything else because a lot of times the infrastructure is not there for that. And let's take our trekking poles for instance. Most of our supply chain is a drive away from our warehouse. So the vast majority of parts just come from around here. And that on the face of it is great, but we had to have a huge infrastructure investment in machinery, in teaching our factories getting machinery. So all of those had to be rebuilt in order to be a more sustainable product compared to just finding a factory that already exists in Korea or China or Vietnam and say, make this for us. Those are the specs and that's it. So the investment in infrastructure is much, much greater. But now, because we are closer, the ability to scale curves much better because we can work with our factories to become more efficient or make changes more quickly. We are not susceptible to trade wars or now the huge traffic that is outside ports. All of those they hit bottom line in the long term. So it's harder I think, especially for small businesses, understand that if they do a big investment in the beginning, they'll have a more sustainable process, economically more sustainable process in the long term. And it's a hard pill to swallow, probably. And also a lot of small businesses just don't have the capital. We almost closed down because of those trekking poles, because of creating that infrastructure. So that's why I think it's in the long term it works better. You just need to go through a much bigger hoop or a much higher hoop, to make it work.
Right, but then you have those standards from the get-go and you don't have to flip your business later on because you have this framework that is sustainable both environmentally and economically, and then you can kind of just build it up from there.
Exactly. And also when you work with those big factories, they a lot of times have outrageous minimum order quantity for parts or for anything. It's just the way it operates because they need to justify their infrastructure. So when you work with more local systems, you tend to have a better understanding. You can buy smaller quantities, you can produce smaller quantities, so the upfront cost per unit is smaller, and then you can find ways to scale it. So it's kind of more of a balance between the need to have the cheapest possible part to have something that is more attainable.
Yeah, okay. That makes a lot of sense. I had to think about it for a second.
Yeah, it's one of those things that until you're in the thick of it, it's really hard to understand how things are being made. Just the process of making something happen. And I still claim that one of the best, most amazing inventions in the world is the plastic toothbrush.
Oh, why is that? You should explain that.
In a toothbrush, there are 3 different materials. And when you hold a toothbrush, just a plain plastic toothbrush that might have a rubberized handle and nylon bristles, that actually is made from 3 different materials. And when you get it, it looks like a seamless single unit. And it costs nothing. It costs mere few dollars. And if you go for the nice ones, they might cost you $10. It is amazing to think that a factory optimized the process that something that has 3 different materials and it's seamless and has no weak spots can cost so little, and it's so easy to use.
Right. So you're talking more on like the process manufacturing side that it is like.
And the availability. I mean, we don't think about it, but in order to make a toothbrush, for someone to sit down and manually make that toothbrush is extremely complex because those tiny nylon bristles, they need to be over molded into a handle, and just that concept is hard to grasp. So we have those and they're still easy to use, sometimes even use recycled materials. And it's just, I find it amazing every time. And that's only because now I make things in a large scale to understand the small wonders of the way we make things now.
Yeah, and I think because consumers were so far removed from that actual production process that it can be really hard to grasp those types of things and just like how much actually goes into making items that we use every single day.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And this is why a lot of times we invite people to come in, well, less now, but we wanted people to see how we make the trekking poles. So when they hear that a trekking pole, that, I don't know if you've seen our design, it's a really simple product. It's so simplistic, so it's effective. It's a very minimalist design. It ties to the minimalist concept. But the process of making them is so complex, despite the fact that it looks so simple. I think we even wrote a few blog posts about just trying to give people pictures from us making them, so you understand the process and why they cost so much. Not because we go on a shopping spree every time that someone buys a pair of trekking poles, because that's just the process.
Yeah, and I think sometimes understanding those processes makes you more willing to invest in those products because you understand like, oh, these are more durable, they are more sustainably made, and there's something that, well, you're just investing in it. Like it's something that should last you a long time. And one thing that I did want to talk about with your company specifically is that you do refurbish items, don't you?
Yes, we try and refurbish, well, pretty much anything you can. Or let me redefine it. We try and make sure as little goes into the landfill as possible. A lot of the design, so the trekking poles, also the TPU products, they are all based on the idea that you can repair them. The design is very much a repairable mindset. The trekking poles, there are very few parts that can actually break. Breaking the actual components is very, very hard. We've tried and it's really hard. We so far, I don't even remember how much in the market, but should be in the thousands. We had 2 carbon fiber parts actually break, and one of them with Nathan's son playing baseball with. So it was a valid break. But otherwise, it's a very, very hard thing to do. So the idea is that you can fix them. Just duct tape on the trail will do 99% of the problems. It means that we can bring parts back into our warehouse, take out what doesn't work, and fix them, rebuild them, and they are good as new. So we try and do that rather than tell people, no, just we'll send you a replacement and then you can chuck them in the bin. We rather get the parts back, see what went wrong, because we get to learn from that, and then fix it and turn it into an almost new product.
That's awesome. But you guys kind of have an advantage as far as those repairs go because you make the trekking poles in Portland, don't you?
Yes, we make them in Portland, and that's part of the mindset behind having a closer and shorter supply chain. There's a person that makes the poles, his name is Devo. He's making every single pole, so he can look at a pole and know exactly what needs to be adjusted or repaired or so on. So getting them back and getting them repaired and refurbished and then back into the market both offers our customers a good solution in terms of if there is a problem and they don't need a pole. And also it means that we can offer a more affordable option because this is a product that already been used and otherwise would have been considered part of the cost of doing business. Instead, we're able to refurbish them. And then we can offer a more affordable product for people who maybe don't have a need for the newest and shiniest and are happy to have a couple of scratches for something they can actually afford.
Yeah, that accessibility is a big piece, I think, when you're buying or investing in higher quality gear. So that's awesome.
Mm-hmm. And we try and do the same with the Vectors, which is only a $20 water container, but still some of them are being returned just because people don't like the idea or it doesn't work for them. Or back when we worked with Amazon a lot of time will just accept returns without anything, so we will get back brand new products that were just returned and we don't even know why. So we'll test them, and if they are in good working order, we'll disinfect them and clean them and repack them, and they are as a refurbished product again. It's not a big difference, but we try and offer them for $12 or $13. And again, it's just that tiny bit more accessible for someone who can't afford the $20.
Adventuring plans on your calendar? Remember to grab your Lava Linens travel towel on your way out the door. Founded by a mother-daughter team, Lava Linens crafts durable, luxurious travel towels as a more sustainable and better performing alternative to microfiber and cotton towels. Powered by flax and hemp, they're designed to be by your side for years to come. Use the code Outdoor Minimalist for 15% off your next order. As someone that works in the outdoor industry, and you kind of have multiple perspectives here, so how do you think other businesses, whether they are already established or just starting, how do you think they can help push sustainability to become more of an industry standard and keep those as the forefront of their business plan and production models?
That's a hard one because each business is its own personality. I don't know if everyone cares about it enough to even do the investment. So that's a step one. Sadly, sustainability became a political concept instead of just a way of life. I'm not quite, well, I know how that happened, but that's a different conversation. So just making it less political. Our sustainability efforts have nothing to do with my perspective about the world. They're just a business practice, and probably do a bit more research into what is the true impact, not just the initial investment, which is always going to be big, but also running the numbers long term to see what is the impact and think more globally about those things. Over time, I think things will be harder and harder to make. It just, anything from raw materials becoming more scarce and expensive. It's good business practice at this point to be a sustainable business, in my opinion. And I think if more businesses will look at it that way rather than trying to appease the customers, but actually a business practice, it will be easier to make it an important part of how they run their business.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. But it is a lot about just mindset, and then evaluating your end goal is a really big influence. At least sustainability should be. So before we jump off here, last thing, where can people learn more about CNOC Outdoors, and how can they connect with you and find your products most easily?
The easiest is our website, cnocoutdoors.com. It's CNOCOutdoors.com. We also have a growing number of retailers that we work with. And we definitely encourage people to go and find those retailers and make sure that you buy through them, because that sustains the industry much more. So we work a lot with garage grown gear, that I'll be happy to see more people use them as an alternative to Amazon and things like that, especially for outdoor gear. Yeah, our site remains the best place.
Awesome. Yeah, so I'll link that in the episode description as well, so you can just hop down there and check that out. But thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me about this today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
I just want to say thank you again to Gilad and the CNOC Outdoors team for all of their help on this podcast episode and for their contributions to the Outdoor Minimalist book. Thanks for listening, and if you like what you hear, let me know. Leave a review and be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can find me on Instagram at outdoor.minimalist.book. Follow there for daily updates, other educational resources, and to help build an outdoor community with the shared goal to create a better outdoor space as we recreate.